Hello and welcome to Analog Shtick, a podcast all about video games. On today's show, our special guest is the creative producer at Mediatonic, who I was fortunate enough to meet at ETOO a couple of weeks ago, and he was there showing off Mediatonic's new game Foul Play, which is scheduled for release. When exactly is it coming out exactly?
We're hoping for kind of late August, early September on Steam and XBLA.
Well, that's the plugs already out of the way.
There you go.
Yep, and Jeff is also here to talk as well about, his thoughts on E2, to talk about Foul Play, even about E3 if we like, because we haven't actually had a chance on this show. And yeah, Jeff, thank you very much for coming on.
That's a pleasure.
It's taken a week or two to get our schedules synced for this.
But clearly very busy people.
Yeah, but the planets have aligned and you are finally here. So first of all, what I like to do when people come on, I like to find out a little bit about them personally, what got them into playing video games and what got them up to the point with where they are now actually making games. So, fire away and give us your history in about 5 minutes.
History in 5 minutes. Okay, so I was bought my first game system when I was 4 years old, just about to turn 5. It was an Atari 800 XL, which was like essentially a cartridge loader, but they shoved a keyboard in there as well, just for fun. So really, even though I was too young to really understand it, I was playing Pong and Jet Set Willy and all of the ridiculous stuff, like when they first came out, and really, like, home personal computers were a fairly new thing. So I was just the weird kid whose parents had decided to get him a personal computer, apparently because my mum was walking past the shop and I held my arms out behind her head, and she was like, what is wrong with him? And I was just clutching towards a monitor and a keyboard, and I had no idea what it was.
Just magnetically drawn towards
exactly, I didn't think it was even on, which is a little bit strange. My love is clearly for just the physical things, not the games. And then I just became absolutely obsessed, with just like growing up and seeing how like the games changed. As for actually kind of moving into the games industry, that wasn't something I really thought I'd be able to do. I'm a kind of writer, designer, producer. I can't code. I'm a terrible, terrible artist, as all of the artists I work with will testify when I give my examples of what I think something should look like.
But you're giving confidence to me already, I'll tell you that much.
Really, it was for the love of games, and really I would just totally involve myself in them from an early age. I think the stuff that like massively turned my head when I was really young was the text adventures. So I would quite happily, I learned how to spell light lamp and swing axe at goblin before I knew really what those words meant, because I needed to in order to make things happen.
Yeah.
And then really for me, if the split between the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive, my parents bought me Mega Drive, so I was all about Sonic the Hedgehog, and then had the joy of rediscovering everything that happened on the Super Nintendo a few years afterwards. So I just think that was an absolutely wonderful golden era of games, and where most of my love for anything to do with the games comes from. And then I just disappeared and thought I was going to be an actor or a playwright for about 6 years. Went to university. And then obviously this is a really classic route to being in the games industry. Having done my modern drama degree, of which we can go into more detail later, I can say I have pretended to be a tree legitimately at some point in my life.
I did performing arts for sixth form, so
there you go.
We are on the same medium here.
I think so. We could probably get together and do some like performance art piece, maybe.
Let's stop the show now. Let's just go and do this right now.
When you said we'd talk about E3, I think it'd be much better if we conveyed our thoughts on E3 via music and movement at some point.
No, we must convey via tree positions.
Yeah, exactly. Pick a tree and the emotion that most describes how you felt watching E3, and then we'll just take it from there.
That sounds great.
That's where the drama is. So I came out of that, and against all expectations, a degree in modern drama didn't immediately open doors.
It's funny how that works, isn't it?
I was shocked, but picked myself up, and then just spent, I wouldn't say like 10 years in the wilderness. I just think 10 years doing what most people who have been through their 20s would absolutely understand, is just working out what the hell you want to do.
Yeah.
And so I've done loads of things. I worked in a CD store, the civil service, spent some wonderful few years doing finances for a major charity. And then out of the blue, I just kind of got contacted by one of the other producers at Mediatonic, a guy called Jim Griffiths, asking if I wanted to do some writing for a video game. The pitch, he basically said he'd pitched a game which had a lot of writing, and director of games at Mediatonic, Paul Croft, said, okay, you need some help. Do you know anyone who understands games but also understands like script and writing? And he was like, yeah, I know one guy. So he gave me a call, and it was just weird. It was like a switch went off in my head. You know, I remembered how much I loved games. I hadn't lost the love of video games at all. I'd still been playing them, but the idea that there would be a career in that had kind of passed me by. So I came in initially as a writer, and then just did everything I possibly could to understand how you make games and how that works, how you can facilitate that, how you can come up with good design, and certainly like learning how to make bad design, and just kind of learning from mistakes. And over the past 4 or so years, we've just been powering through at Mediatonic and just creating things that we love, just born out of kind of hard work and making mistakes, but learning from them, I guess.
This sounds like a Ken Levine story, but on a slightly smaller scale to start with. So I'm expecting BioShock Infinite as the next game you do.
Well, absolutely, yeah.
So your CV that's quite the patchwork then.
It's checkered. It's a checkered CV. And I'll tell you what, like when you go to somewhere like, I know we're going to come on to ETOO later, when I kind of chat to the indies, that's why I'm so in awe, because like these guys know exactly what they want to do. You know, and it's clear, like from the moment they had an opportunity, it's like, I'm going to make video games, and I'm going to make this very particular video game, because why not?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know what impression you got from ET, but that was really like, it's always like the overwhelming passion for the industry.
Definitely got that, like, there's a guy I'm going to try and get on at some point, but the guy Alan Zacconi, who was in the corner doing Still Time.
Oh, yeah, Still Time.
Yeah, and he was definitely, like, especially it's when you've got that kind of one-man team, and this is my passion, I do this in my spare time, and, you know, whenever I've got time to be able to go and do that. And they're the ones that you're like, wow, that is the true kind of form of the dedication to wanting to make a video game, you know, all by yourself, or just trying to get scraps with people here. It's like, can you do this? Can you do that? And that's amazing to see that sort of stuff happening.
I completely agree. I think I'm more inspired by going to those small events than I am by going to like somewhere like Gamescom, or I've not been to E3. But I imagine it's a similar thing, you know, like you're just in awe of these huge teams and these huge guys, and I will take nothing away from AAA development. I think once you've done a production role, even on a small scale, you have nothing but respect for anyone who manages to see like a AAA game through to the end.
Yeah.
Actually, what I get from, you know, like when I go to a bit of All Right and the Wild Rumpus and these indie events, is I just think, wow, these guys are doing everything they can to kind of get their game out and get their idea out with actually like quite minimal resource.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, Mediatonic is an indie studio. It's a studio that's been slowly building itself up over you know, the past 8 years, and you know, it's got a slight bit of client work because of those years to fall back on. You know, we can always like keep the studio afloat, but when I'm chatting to these guys who just want to do anything they can to get their idea out, it just means like, okay, well, I'm in a really privileged position where, fair enough, we don't, you know, we're still on a really tight budget, and there's stuff that, you know, there's only so much we can do, but just make sure that if like you're doing as good in your position as those guys would if they were like substituted for me, if you know what I mean, if they were like given like, okay, actually here's an artist, here's an animator, here's a developer, you don't have to self-develop, or you can help, you know, like what would you do if you had just these 3 or 4 extra people kind of dedicated and helping you out? And I just think a lot of them would be doing stuff that was off the scale.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So tell us about then how you told us how you got into Mediatonic. Tell us sort of how long ago that was, and kind of where the company was at the time to where they are now, and kind of how you've progressed through that time.
Cool. Well, I mean, it was just over 4 years ago when I first started. The Mediatonic was most famous, and still is quite famous, for the amateur surgeon games, which we worked with Adult Swim, and they're still working with Adult Swim even to this day. And it's been a really kind of like, I think that's the example of the client relationships that like mean a lot to us at Mediatonic. So if you're working with someone like Adult Swim, they still want ridiculous ideas, you know, and it's a really nice kind of like proving ground for like new people in the studio, or just to be like, okay, here's this ridiculous idea. Adult Swim are going to help us make it, you know. So that's what they've done. We got a lot of attention with Amateur Surgeon, which is really like Jim kind of pushing out narrative in a flash game. Like actually, there is. I think it was initially just going to be I'm not Surgeon Simulator. That's the most recent one. a trauma center kind of rip off. But actually, it was the story that Jim just kind of put his heart and soul into. That started really getting people talking about it. He still has incredible amounts of like fan art and stuff coming through just because he bothered to try and tell. Fair enough, it's a story about a guy called Alan Probe, which is about the level of intelligent humour we get in the game. But it was the fact that he wanted to kind of like it was going to be more than just a kind of a knockoff, of Trauma Centre. So that had got us a lot of attention. We were doing a lot of client work then, but it was a really interesting time because the PSP Minis platform had just arrived, and that's once again that was a really great stepping stone for us. We hadn't made anything for a device before. It had always been like Flash, PC, HTML. So actually developing a game and having to kind of go through all of the TCRs and the procedures to get a game onto a Sony platform was a massive like jumpstart for us. We did Monsters Probably Stole My Princess and WTF, which within the kind of the very like small Minis community rated really well, and it was the kind of the Metacritics, which is, you know, unfortunately what you have to keep coming back to when you're looking at games. It was the Metacritics on those games and Thousand Tiny Claws, which kind of just like drew attention and allowed us to be like, actually, you know what, we are ready to kind of look at an XBLA game now and like take the next step up. And that's when we kind of moved towards Foul Play. So Foul Play's been in development for me personally about a year and a half now, because there was about 6 months from ridiculous idea to, all right, we're actually making this ridiculous idea. And it's been about a year since then, and now we're just kind of building up to, you know, we're putting the finishing touches on the game and building up to release.
Awesome. Okay, so tell us then, I mean, you give me the pitch and the USPs of what Foul Play is, and sort of how the idea of Foul Play came to be.
Cool. Well, the idea of Foul Play is a side-scrolling beat-em-up set entirely within a Vaudevillian stage show.
So this is right up your street then. I'm presuming you had some pitch in the theatre-esque side of it.
The thing is, I thought I was absolutely leaving the theatre side behind, and I still have no idea how the biggest game I've made to date is completely entrenched in the theatre, because exactly that. Like now, all of my friends from years back, like, oh, of course you made a game about being on stage. But actually, it came about. We were slightly drunk.
This is usually how these stories start,
which is it's always a good starting place. Yep. And I think I was chatting to the Chompy Chomp guys at ETOO. I think it was either that, it's either those or Laura from Indiehaven, who said, so you were drunk enough to have the idea, but not too drunk to forget it the next morning. Which I thought was like pretty spot on. So we had this idea. We were drunk trying to come up with like, okay, what game do we want to make? We've always been fairly interested in side-scrolling beat-em-ups. Being a child of the 80s, I think, and you know, losing your heart to Golden Axe and the coin op and stuff.
I'm going to presume if you had the Mega Drive, we're looking at sort of Golden Axe, Streets of Rage.
Absolutely, you know, and once you've played those games, you know, if you come from that era, I think the side-scrolling beat-em-up just holds a really special place in your heart, which maybe doesn't quite like translate in modern day. But those were the games where like you would save up your 10 pence pieces And every time, you know, you went out for like a family trip or a friend's birthday to a bowling alley or something, I wouldn't care about bowling. I would be hunting out what arcade machines do they have. Oh, good, they've got golden eggs. Oh, thank God, there's the 4-player turtles, you know. And that would be the highlight, and I would be buzzing off of that for the next few weeks. You know?
We had a swimming pool near where I lived, and when I was in primary school, so I was about 8 or 9, it was every Tuesday, and they had 2 arcade cabinets. One of them was a Buster Bubble or whatever it is. I can't remember what it's called exactly.
Bubble Bubble.
Bubble Bubble, that's the one.
Right.
But they had that, and they had Metal Slug. And I never had any money on me to play it, but I always, to this day, I've played it now, but for about 2 years where I was going swimming, I was like, that is the greatest game I've ever seen in my life. I have to play that at some point.
Bubble Bubble, they must have been running a racket at swimming pools, because that's my memory. I went to Crook Log swimming pool in Bexley Heath when I was little, and they had Bubble Bubble as well, and that was like, it was like, yeah, sure, I can do some swimming, but really, let's just get all this nonsense out of the way and spend the rest of the time playing Bubble Bubble, and then we'll all be happy.
Exactly. Because the thing is, because we don't really have like kind of arcade cabinets in a whole in a room, you know, those kind of arcade places. So
No.
there'd just be the one or two sprawn about the place.
And I tell you what, if you're a geek child like me, and I was a geek child, you'd have this kind of sixth sense. You could spot them like two rooms of plate glass as you were being walked along, you know, the high street to go shopping in Argos or something, and you'd have this kind of like, there is an arcade machine in that shop over there. We must go now.
My spider senses are tingling.
Yeah, basically, yes. I had innate senses for losing lots and lots of money in coin-operated arcade machines, and that's fine. So yeah, we were drunk. We were talking about
On a 6-pack at this point.
probably on a 6-pack at this
Not
point.
quite at the 12 point yet. Where you
Oh
starting
no,
to get
no,
memories
that
fuzzy.
would be too far. You know, that's when things start getting fuzzy. And we were talking about like this kind of the fake scenery. You know, what if? I think it started with LARPing. Like, what if there was a side-scrolling beat 'em up that was just like a giant LARPing mission? You know, so that's like, so in case it's not immediately obvious, like live-action role-playing. So guys dressed up as you know, their favourite heroes and going down to the woods and fighting a whole bunch of other guys who are dressed up as goblins and that. And then actually the Costume Quest had come out fairly recently, the Double Fine adventure, which did a lot of the things we thought, oh, that's quite funny, really well. So we moved away from LARPing, but we love this idea of like having a fake fight, like the people involved aren't the bad guys, everyone's just kind of putting on a show. And that led to conversations about like fake scenery and how interesting that would be. And then in my height of drunkenness, because we had, you know, laptops, I brought up a Smashing Pumpkins video for Tonight.
Oh,
Yes.
now you are a man after my own heart.
There we go, you see. So I was just like, look, you have to see this, because, and I totally I felt really bad. My head of QA, Luke, on Foul Play, he's an ex-film student, so when we were being interviewed at ETOO, I mentioned the Smashing Pumpkin thing, and I was like, now Luke, you're a film student, the Smashing Pumpkins video is like a rip-off of a very old, like the first film, like Flight to the Moon or something, by that, you know, landmark film director. What was his name? And Luke just like stared daggers at me. He's like, here I am being interviewed. It's our first ever interview for Foul Play. I didn't know I was going to be sitting on this couch until about 10 seconds ago. They're pointing cameras at me and you're giving me general knowledge quiz. You know? So I'm going to go with Méliès. I think it's the Méliès brothers. But yeah, it's this wonderful video of like an adventure, you know, a ridiculous, audacious adventure where a couple go to the moon in a rocket ship, and then the rocket ship has wonderful steampunk stylings to it, and then they fall out of the sky and into the ocean, and there's the King Neptune plays with all of his mermaids. There's like a whole show for them, and it was this kind of Baron Munchausen. Like, what if that was, you know, if someone was telling you that as an adventure? It seems to just fit a video game so well, because no one needs to explain themselves. It's just like, this is a ridiculous adventure. And then we start talking about like the guys you're fighting would be dressed up and be funny. And actually that was like just the grain, like the germ of an idea. We had to go through a lot of rewrites to really understand like how that would work as a video game. But like from where it started, that's where Foul Play came from. It was just this knowledge that I think what makes the Melee film and Smashing Pumpkin, even though it's ripping it off, work so well, is that it's this absolute commitment to trying to tell the most audacious of stories on a minimal budget, without like really the technology required to do it. But that's not holding anyone back. It's the kind of like, we're doing it as best as we possibly can, and that's something we took forward to Foul Play when we were looking at the scene changes and how that would work. It's these guys don't have the technology to do everything that's possible to recreate Baron Dashforth's incredible adventures, but damn it, they're going to give it their best shot. So yeah.
Well, before we get carried away, because I could spend an hour just talking about Smashing Pumpkins music videos.
Absolutely, we'll do that. We can come back and do that. That's fine.
We'll do that for another podcast at some point. One of the kind of ways I could sort of give a visual idea for some people, like another Double Fine game, Stacking. I don't know if you played that, and the cutscenes in that and how they were set up. For anyone who has played that, I think that has not quite the sort of silent film black and white approach, but just the way that the stages are set up and that theatrical production, that really, it hits home how it's supposed to be presented like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be really interesting to see how many other game designers and developers feel this way. But every time you settle on an idea and a story, you then inevitably notice 5 other games that are doing it at the same time, either in production or not. And because it's always been that way for us, I assume it's always that way for everyone else.
I'm noticing that at the moment because I'm working on a game at the moment, and within the span of a couple of weeks, we've picked up on 3 or 4 games that are doing a similar thing. So I completely understand that. That's
cool. So basically, that was that. I thought Stacking was a beautiful game. And I think the way Double Fine approach their games just seems like a really smart way of doing it. It seems similar to how we do it at Mediatonic, really, which is there enough passion behind this idea?
Yeah.
And it is an idea that someone can go, oh yeah, like that. Yeah, I played that, without really knowing everything about it. And I think with Double Fine, they've built up enough kind of faith now. I think that people will just kind of take a bit of a risk on it. It's like, okay, well, it seems crazy enough idea, but it's got enough. It's got Schaefer behind it, so we'll take a punt. We'll see how that goes.
And when I was playing it, and I'm the kind of person that when I'm playing something, if I immediately think, oh, I think it's like this game, I tend not to say that because I immediately think that everyone else that's playing it has said the same thing, and the developers are like, just see it for what it is, not for what it's like. But I was playing it, and the modern twist on the beat 'em up these days, you would probably say is Castle Crashers, and it did have a similar kind of fighting style. But the way that it was explained to me and what you're actually doing, it is very, very different. So if you can sort of discuss what it does differently to just being just another sort of standard beat 'em up, because it does do some different mechanics that I really liked the idea of when it was explained to me and as I was playing it.
Yeah. I think it's worth stating Castle Crashers, just I think Castle Crashers was just reinvigorated the side scrolling beat 'em up. I think there've been a lot of I guess old farts like us really who are okay, what games do we like Streets of Rage? Well, let's just make Streets of Rage, and actually Streets of Rage is great if you remember playing Streets of Rage. It suffers from a lot of side-scrolling beat-em-ups of that era suffered from, which is repetition, And
it also suffers from playing on an Xbox D-pad as well.
Yes, it really suffers from that. So I think Castle Crash is just it really just softened all of those edges. It just it approached it again as what does a side-scrolling beat-em-up feel like in this day and age, And it's just quite right, it's an excellent game. So what we didn't want to do is just make Castle Crashers on stage. Again, I think that would have just, given us unfavourable comparison, in fairness. So we really wanted to look at how fighting on stage changes everything. It was a holistic approach to the whole design. So I think there's 2 elements. One is how the fights feel, very much getting into the nitty gritty of the fight mechanic, and the other stuff is how it feels on stage. But the first is the fight mechanic, and I love Soul Calibur. And the Soul Calibur games, I think they do something really smart, which is you don't need to learn on Soul Calibur a string of X, X, Y, Y, B, B, B. It doesn't matter, because the only thing you need to know about Soul Calibur is that X is a horizontal strike, Y is going to send stuff up into the air or slam stuff down, depending on the position of your, player, and the other is kick. And I love that. I love the fact that when I'm stringing combos together, I'm doing it because it feels like the right thing to do at the time. It's like, now I want to send this guy across the screen. I know it's going to be this button. Now I want to send this guy up into the air. I want it to be this button. And the player being able to do that quite fluidly. So I really try to kind of bring that into the Foul Play combat system. Obviously, it's never going to be as complex as something like Soul Calibur, but the idea that the player at all points has control over the stage, and control over the guys around them. So initially, that system I think works really nicely in the game. We've locked into it like a parry system, a bit like the Arkham Asylum. Guys kind of like have sparks above their head, and that's literally like the guy saying, "We practice this backstage. This is where you grab me."
Yeah.
And then the Baron like grabs, and then from that the player has like a set of moves that really control the stage. They can do like an area of effect attack. They can throw a guy across the stage, or they can keep the guy close to them and concentrate entirely on that guy to kind of increase their combo. And through all of that, the player has power, basically. It's like they are the star of the show. They are jumping around the stage. They're linking it all together. They can choose what kind of moves are right for what particular moment. And that's really where I think like one of the strengths of Foul Play is how all of that flows, and how hard that was to actually make work in any way whatsoever. So that's one side of the coin. The other is the fact that it is happening on stage. So there isn't an energy bar, there isn't an energy meter. Everything you do is rated by the audience, who are always visible on stage. I really wanted the guys to be like up close and personal to what you were doing. And you can see when you're stringing a whole bunch of combos together, beating guys up, doing all of the special moves, the crowd get more and more excited. If you continue to do this stuff, the crowd get really, really wild, and your score multiplier increases, and everything is fantastic. Even better if you've got your partner Scampwick there, you guys can throw enemies to each other, catch them, slam them, work together to absolutely send the audience into a frenzy. The flip side of that is if you're not doing any of those things, if you're not being exciting, if you are getting hit, the audience get less and less enthused about the play. You do that for too long, the curtains fall on your performance. So yeah, it's very much about entertaining the audience, and how that changes some fairly fundamental things. Taking the energy bar away from the enemies seems strange, but actually makes perfect sense. And actually seeing the enemies in the game not as antagonists, but as potential. Like, I think once players have got used to the mechanics, they don't want the enemies to be cleared from the screen, because if there's still an enemy on that screen, there's a chance to increase your combo, there's a chance to do something fantastic, and really, like, the enemies become opportunity as opposed to just another thing you've got to get out of the way before moving on.
Yeah, because I was thinking to myself, like when I left and I was on my way home, I was thinking about having a fighting game or a beat 'em up game, and it's like, there's no energy bars. That seems like such a new interesting thing. But then I thought to myself, I've been playing professional wrestling games for like the last 15 years, and they do something quite similar. And like some of the games have like some of the older games, like the Acclaim games on the PlayStation, where you would if you do the same moves after the same moves over and over again, the crowd would start booing and whatnot. But then, yeah, just this idea of, taking that energy bar away and then having it in the hands of the audience it's just a really cool concept that I don't think it's been done in some areas, but it's just something that, has not been to the degree that I was seeing kind of visually and audibly that was being done with Foul Play, and I really like that. I wanted to ask as well, like, I don't know how much of the technical side of things you can talk about with...
I'm going to like make Ricky and Gabor developers absolutely cringe. But I'll give it my best shot.
Well, it's mainly just, I mean, we can go straight on the theoretical side of things, because it is set on a theatre, so it's, you go on the stage and you've got the background planes that are taken away when we go onto the next part of the stage.
Yes.
And that's just all one seamless transition? There's no loading times. There's no nothing like that.
No loading times. I can try. I I can let you know like really what we tried to do there and what had to happen. I will do a caveat just for the benefit of the developers on the team.
Yep.
That as always, like I bet if they could go back now, there's stuff they'd probably change.
Yeah.
But essentially, yeah, all of the background scene changes, we had to create an exporter. So everything is created in Flash, but then it's kind of exported into a JSON file, which is then read in a particular way. This is how technical I get. But essentially, if we try to put those animations like straight into the game, it's like PNG sequences, we wouldn't have had memory to get like probably like 2 or 3 stages into the game before everything fell apart.
Yeah.
So it was really key for us to like be able, because that is the question. It's like, do we put loading times in there? Do we not? And obviously, I just think it would absolutely ruin it if everything just stopped for a while whilst we wait for Baron Dashforth to sort himself out.
It would be interesting to see a real live theatre production actually do it that way.
Yeah, just everyone just stops on stage awkwardly for a short time, So we really wanted to avoid that. And there was a few things because a question that came up really early on. Sorry, I've gone off on a tangent.
No, it's good.
One of the questions came up was like, Baron Dashforth has got this incredible life. Should we do some cutscenes at some point, like him remembering his past? And I was like, absolutely no. I'm sure, because we have such talented animators at Mediatonic, I'm sure we could come up with some beautiful cutscenes. But for me, it was about you have bought the ticket. You are watching this stage show. This is the only way Baron Dashforth, with the technology around him, could possibly convey his life story. And to suddenly like rip away from that and zoom into his head and get some thoughts was just wrong. It's like this is the story, this is the play, this is the representation. So as much as possible, I wanted everything to be told on stage, which had some real difficulties narratively, which I hope we've smoothed out as much as possible, because it's a bit Basil exposition, where everything's happening on stage. Especially when it's 5 different stories, like at different points in his life, you really try to play down as much as possible there. This is where we are now, and this is what we're doing. But it was still absolutely important to me that everything happens on stage, and everything the player experiences is happening on stage.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of different acts. So we've got like Cairo, we've got Victorian London, and I presume that the sort of underwater section was completely taken from the Smashing Pumpkins video.
It was. Some of it is a bit. It's more Jules Verne than anything else. But I did absolutely sneak in one scene, which is an entire just like, yes, you sink to the bottom of the ocean. King Neptune is there. But instead of like having like dancing female mermaids,
and Billy Corgan,
just Billy Corgan. If he wasn't going to sue my ass, we would have put Billy Corgan in there.
I'm sure he would have loved it.
He'd have been fine with it. He seems quite a genial
He's a free
guy.
spirit.
So instead you've got these mermen basically. That Scambrick's really disappointed because they appear at the side of the spotlight at the start. He's like, oh my god, mermaids, this is going to be incredible. And these big burly bearded mermen come on and decide to kind of fight them in this arena, which is a little bit like a netball arena. Initially it was a netball arena, but that didn't quite make sense. So we're big fans of the beach volleyball scene in Top Gun, and I think
naturally.
That's probably naturally, of course. So I think if we didn't get something in that at some point, we'd have been disappointed. So there's the kind of Jules Verne. We tried to draw on a lot of stuff. I think the first play, is very much Egyptian, Cairo teams. It was just kind of creating a very obvious touchstone for people who are just coming into the game. Like, sure, he goes to Egypt, I understand Egypt and temples. Then we start ripping more liberally from like the really interesting authors of the time, so Lovecraft and Jules Verne, and like Mary Shelley. So just like really, I every time I come back, I can't pick which is my favourite. It changes, but I think it's the one based in London with the Flame Colts, which is the 4th play. And I can't really talk about the final play because that's the Foul Play, and that would be giving far too much away. But yes, there's lots going on.
So how many kind of concepts and ideas for different plays did you have?
I had loads. I mean, there's so many touchstones you can draw on from that era to kind of that you want to bring out. It was more a question of having to lose stuff in the end, and make it coherent. When we first came to Baron's life story, just for anyone who's not entirely clear, Baron Dashforth is a demon hunter, a Victorian demon hunter, who has lived this incredible life, and a bit like Willy Wonka has decided for one night only to tell his life story, but no one actually knows what he's been doing. They're aware that he is a demon hunter and dabbles in the occult and is very good at what he does, but no one has really known up until this point, the secrets of his life story. But that didn't come easy. Initially, I mentioned Baron Munchausen earlier. This idea was that maybe Baron Dashforth is making it all up. Maybe he is this Baron Munchausen character. Maybe he just tells tall stories, and he's financed this whole play so he could tell a ridiculous tale, which was really funny when we were pitching it and starting to write about it and put these scenes together. But then, you think of the user journey, and you think of how the play would feel at the end, when it's like, oh yeah, it was all a lie, which is really like only one step removed from it was all a dream, and it's massively disappointing. So we wanted to kind of like take a step back and be like, okay, so what is he doing? He wasn't always a demon hunter. We had this whole kind of crazy old English gentlemen against each other kind of things. There was a bad guy character called Von Baklava, and they were all like up against each other, and they were retelling their stories, and nothing fit because there had to be a really good reason for the Baron to be telling his story, which was more than just pure ego. Because once again, that's mostly disappointing to the play. You're just playing a guy who, by the end of the thing, it's like, so why did you put on this play? I don't know, because I'm brilliant. And you can sometimes get away with that, but it just didn't feel right for this play, for this game. So we had to wind it back, and then when I finally understood what the story of Baron Dashforth was and exactly why he had to tell it, it was just one of the most exciting things in the world, because everything clicked all at once and made perfect sense. And I just thought that it made the final play have so much more riding on it than anything we could have done previously. So I think actually we took a lot of time. I talked about those 6 months before we started properly making the game, and most of that was spent with me banging my head against the table, working out, because the pitch, it's a side-scrolling beat-em-up set on a stage. Sounds great, and it sounded great to everyone. And visually, everyone can see exactly how that's going to work and how much fun it's going to be. And no one really cares about the narrative. It's like, well, as long as I'm beating up guys dressed in wolf costumes, that's great. But actually, that took a lot of time, and I think the game is better for us having worked that out before we started making it.
Well, that brings me on to my last question that I have about the game, and I think from what you've told me and the kind of passion about this story of Baron, this might explain somewhat why, because I asked, at the time, I was like, why is this only a 2-player co-op instead of a 4-player co-op?
Yes.
And I'm guessing some of that maybe is to do with the fact that would dilute the story of being on Baron if it was a 4-player.
It's absolutely that. Because it's the tale of two guys, really. Which is essentially, I think one of the things I'm most paranoid about at the moment is the fact that my previous game had like a lead female protagonist who I was kind of really proud of because she wasn't sexualized in any way, and I was like, this is great. She's just a totally capable woman doing stuff. And now, like, that wasn't based on anything happening in the media, and now actually like everything is all about like representation of women in games and out of the industry, and I'm like, God, I'm standing here with a game that's just an absolute sausage fest. It's just full of, it's like guys from start to finish, old English gentlemen, which is a bit of a shame. I could go back, but actually, the more, it's the same reason I didn't go for like 4-way co-op. It's because it's actually a story about a master and an apprentice, and how those guys actually love each other, and really kind of like care about what happens to each other and need each other, and how they intimately understand like why they have to do what they have to do in this night, which goes against pretty much everything they've been doing their whole lives.
Yeah.
So for me, that would absolutely dilute the experience. If it's like, yeah, here's Dashforth, and you can have Scampwick. I don't know, some other person. It's like, no, Scampwick was there. Like they're retelling a story, so it has to be. So whereas it's I'm sure we could have got a bit more attention from the multiplayer crowd if we said, yeah, there's 4 multiplayer. It absolutely would have like killed the narrative for the game. So for that reason, it had to go.
All right then. Well, so moving on a little bit to the actual event where I got to see Foul Play in action. There was this thing going on where some people, mainly Keith Stewart, was harping on about not being able to go to E3, and that was pretty much what I got as the general gist of it. And so he went, fuck it, we'll make our own event in London and we'll have a bunch of people come down and some indie developers can come down and showcase their games. And everyone thought, you know what, this is a really good idea. We like this. Let's, jump on this. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved. Did Keith come to you, or did you go to him and say, hi, we have a game. Hello, we'd like to show it off?
Well, we've got the incredible networking experience of Ed Fear, who is a guy in the industry. He works at Mediatonic, and it appears he knows everyone in the whole world. So, and he's also friends with everyone in the whole world. So, I think him and Keith know, and George Backer know each other quite well. So, when Keith announced, have we got anyone who wants to come down, to show games at ETOO? It's just around the corner for us. So it just seemed ridiculous that, with the game in the state that it was, we wouldn't kind of go down there and get some opinions on it. So yeah, Ed hooked us up there, and I'm really glad he did, because I thought it was just a kind of fantastic event from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of gutted because I only got to go on the Monday because I was going to Edinburgh for a week off on the Tuesday, and
Me too.
And there was so much stuff to see and play, and I'm sure you had to get back to work and actually making and finishing off the game.
Yeah, that's actually completely accurate. We had to leave once Tracy King came along to kind of move everyone along. We were like, okay, bye guys. And I was just like literally 5 minutes walk back to the studio, back at my desk, and it's like, right. And here we go,
Yeah.
So all of the excitement passed very, very quickly after we left.
And what else? Did you see anything, or I presumed you probably got to have a look at everything else that was around you, because the drink, relax, play bar is quite an intimate, environment. It
gives everyone an opportunity to get really close.
Yes.
So, yeah. Well, we'd already played Chompy Chomp Chomp previously, but Utopian World of Sandwich, they're just lovely guys, so we're really kind of happy to be next to them and see what those guys have been doing. It was a lovely game. Still Time hurts my brain, but everyone should play it because it's the right kind of hurt, I
gotta be honest, me and Alan, we was talking a lot about games, and we was actually talking about a lot of other stuff as well. And we was watching, there was two girls, God bless them, that were playing it, and we was watching on the screen, they could not figure out this one puzzle, and we was kind of mocking them a little bit, and I feel sort of bad, but
I feel terrible.
I feel terrible, I truly do.
No, I think that was probably, I went back and kind of looked up some videos for Still Time. I was absolutely amazed, because it's hard work, but totally rewarding, when you complete it.
Yeah, and again with the same thing where I said I didn't want to say to you, Foul Play is a lot like Castle Crashers. I didn't just want to go to him, this looks a little bit like Braid, but I sort of said, it reminds me of a few games, but you've kind of put a spin on it. It's it's a lot like Braid. I was like, no, we didn't want to talk about Braid. We was just going to talk about Still Time and say it was its own sort of thing, but it had a few elements of other bits and pieces.
Yeah, but he went there. So
he went there. I was like, jeez.
But yeah, there was, I think, but those are the ones that I had an opportunity to engage with whilst I was there. But I was just aware of the list. I think this Surgeon Simulator guys were there the next day, and I just think they've managed to make a really good, what was essentially a one joke horse, a brilliant joke all the same. They've now managed to really kind of turn into a really kind of captivating and lovely game, which still manages to maintain the original joke.
Yeah,
which is great. What else did I play?
And The Last of Us was downstairs, which was just crazy as well.
My girlfriend's away this weekend, and I've decided that's going to be The Last of Us weekend.
Yep.
So I'm just going to buy it. Close all the windows, and just.
I am too much of a wuss to do anything like that. If I'm playing it, I'm playing it at midday, all the lights shining on me on the TV.
Maybe a friend on the phone, just kind of talking you through the more difficult moments. It's
okay, Mark, you'll get through this. It's not even to tell me what to do. It's just motivational support. It's don't worry about the clickers. You can get through it.
I've heard about the clickers.
Yeah, they're not fun. They're not fun.
I'm really looking forward to playing it because it's so rare that a game gets such universal acclaim, and I think there's been a few things recently which have massively turned my head and I've really enjoyed. I played the new Tomb Raider and BioShock Infinite like one after the other, and I was absolutely shocked because I enjoyed the new Tomb Raider so much more than BioShock Infinite, which just blew my mind because I think like the new Tomb Raider, it's such a core game, you know, like everything you do in that game feels great and has been worked out. It's such a kind of like considered experience, whereas with BioShock Infinite I just found I was in awe of everything that had been done technically, but I was just trying to kill things so I could get to the next piece of story, whereas I think in Tomb Raider I was enjoying every part of Tomb Raider, you know, and like when it wasn't telling me the story I was still massively enjoying firing bows at people when they were unaware, kind of thing. Firing arrows.
It's been interesting. Like for me, I think I might have enjoyed Infinite a lot more solely on the basis that I don't play a lot of first-person shooters.
Yes.
So even the bits where I was just shooting everything, it's like, well, I don't do this often, so I'm enjoying these bits.
I think I play him even more seldom because I was like, I don't do this often, and I'm dying all of the time because I'm the worst player of first-person shooters in the world. So yeah, I think I'm probably just way too bad at those games.
But I will agree with the general consensus that the game is probably a little bit too clever for its own good.
The ending's wonderful, though. Not that we can talk about it.
Well, no, I mean, I agree that if you're having to go to a forum to find out what any of it means, maybe it doesn't quite work as well as it probably, you know, should have. But yeah, I still thought it was an incredible experience. Yeah. And I think, like, with ETOO as well, and I was talking to Keith about this on the Monday, and I was like, look, we're only on the Monday, and this is really cool. There's all these people here, all these developers here. You've had sponsors, you know, wanting to back this. And I just said to him, do you think this is going to happen again next year? And he just went, yeah, I'm pretty sure we should be okay. And considering sort of how short notice this came to be, which I could just tell by the lack of sleep that it looked like Keith Stewart had, God bless him.
Yes.
I think that, you know, next year could be just even, you know, bigger, and which could be a problem if it's in the the same location, because, you know, even with 50 people in there, that's quite cramped. And I was gutted because I actually had a ticket to watch the live stream of E3, but I had to get up at like 3 o'clock the next morning, so I couldn't stick around. But from like some of the footage I saw, you know, just a really awesome environment and atmosphere to be a part of. And
I think like the live stream was fantastic. I think the work they did there, it just came across so professional. The opinions were great. I should have mentioned Spilt Milk Studios earlier because I love those guys, and the fact they had Huggatron running in the yard next door, I think is fantastic. But everyone there was like really genuinely contributing and passionate about what was going on. It was nice to kind of, it felt very, I was interviewed on the first evening, so I was there for a bit of the live stream. And it was wonderful to see something as corporate as the Microsoft E3 presentation. And then to cut back to these bunch of indie developers in a room, and actually some like really knowledgeable talking heads, you know, like Lee Alexander there.
Yeah, definitely.
I think George and Keith did a great job of like holding the whole thing together, and then you know that's how I want E3 presented to me. You know, I want to watch the ridiculous razzmatazz, and I want a really kind of down to earth reaction to it from people who actually like are much closer to the industry and understand maybe, you know, from a deeper level, like what's going on there and what we should really be concentrating on.
I feel like the biggest problem that E3 will always have is simply its location. Being in Los Angeles will always give it that complete absurdity and pomp and circumstance. But did you see any of the videogamer.com videos or Matt Lee's? I don't know if you follow him at all. Well, he really brings it all back down to earth. Like he was kind of reviewing and evaluating like how well each of the games and the companies and studios were doing by how much lunge space he had in either sort of showroom, and if he could lunge it so far in one direction, it's like, it's not really busy here. I don't like, you know, I don't think the reception's too good. And that was just great to watch.
Yeah, that's superb.
I was like, yeah, it's just like, you know what, gives it a human element that otherwise this show really doesn't have. And it was amazing thinking about just the complete polar ends of E3 and E2, and I like that. And considering I listen to a lot of music that no one else listens to, I'm the kind of person who's like, I'm going to root for that smaller band. I'm going to root for...
I completely agree with you, and that is actually a massively good point, because what I loved about E2 and what I loved about going to some of the Bit of Alright and the Wild Rumpuses is exactly that feeling. It's like they're absolutely spanning the globe in arena hoggers now and not really creating anything that's particularly interesting. But about 10 years ago, I was watching Biffy Clyro play small pubs. And
Don't talk to me about Biffy Clyro, this is going to make me very upset.
Okay, well, in small pubs, I'm going to do it anyway because it helps my explanation. So back when they were doing like first albums, they actually created some really interesting music. And I was like, these guys are fantastic, you know. I was watching them play in pubs, and it's that. And then and from those guys, there was a community, and I'd never experienced it before. But I'd go to these gigs, and I'd keep going to these gigs, and I'd recognise people because it was so small.
Yeah.
And then I'd be chatting to those people, and they'd be like, "Well, if you like these guys, you should probably listen to Oceansize and Stapleton, all these like really kind of like interesting bands." And
I never thought I'd hear Oceansize mentioned on this podcast.
I never thought I'd say Oceansize and someone actually recognises who they are.
I've seen them like 4 times. They're amazing.
Oh, they are absolutely incredible.
I am so sad they are not about at the moment.
Let's just talk about Oceansize and we can edit this bit out, right? Okay, because fucking hell, man, Oceansize. I was like, when Biffy and Oceansize were both in Beggars Banquet and playing like tiny venues. Oceansize were never playing huge venues to the end, but my God, like when you could just go along and hear most of their Flores just as standard because they hadn't released another album yet. You know, that was some of the greatest music, like gig going days of my life. Those guys were absolutely phenomenal, like off the charts. And it's that, being at E2, I'd been waiting since I'd kind of properly immersed myself in the games industry, like for 4 years now. I've been really waiting for that moment, that kind of, where's the beating heart? You know, where's the excitement? Because even like stripped from E3, you know, what are the guys I should be following? Who are the guys I'm really interested in what they're doing? Because I love what we're doing at Mediatonic, but people don't really know much about that yet. I can't engage people about what we're doing at Mediatonic. So, what do I care about? And it's things like E2, when you just go along and you play a game that someone somewhere has just had a bit of an idea. They've spent a few months putting it together, and it absolutely fundamentally changes how you think about an aspect of gaming, and that's where it gets interesting.
Yeah,
that's why I care.
And we can talk a little bit about. Obviously, you know, there's the rise of the indie scene, and it's been brought up many times on this show.
Sure.
And looking like at E3 and looking at Sony and them really just embracing the indie scene. However much of that you want to say is a way of a desperate ploy to get people to buy a PS Vita. You can sort of,
possibly,
you know, argue one way or the other. I was having a long conversation with the guys who Curve Studios had.
Curve, yeah.
And you know, the guy was trying to convince me, he's like, you should probably get a PS Vita. And it's like, I really would like to get a PS Vita because there's nothing more I'd like to do than play Hotline Miami on a PS Vita. But actually, I've managed to get myself one now, but that's for another day. But it's, you know, amazing to see what Sony are doing and really saying, look, just show us what you've got and we will give you this platform to you know, show, you know, put your games on there. And
I think like the difference with Sony is because it's weird. Instead of Microsoft, actually there's been, if you look back at the history of the XBLA, there's been a history of really excellent games. I know it's not the same as XBLIG, which is pure indie, which I think was, you know, entirely forgotten and unmoderated.
Yes.
I think with regards to XBLA, like, it feels to me that Microsoft wouldn't have done themselves any harm by being prouder of that. You know, there were some games that appeared purely published by Microsoft first on that platform, which I think in the last generation are absolute world beaters. You know, like if we look at the Limbo, Braid, Super Meat Boy, these are all games that, like, when I think of like my gaming life over the past 5 or 6 years, just brought me to a standstill and made me realise, like, this is incredible, like, this is what people should be doing. And it just felt like when you compare the two E3 broadcasts, Sony just were prouder of of the the ability to work with smaller developers, and what those small developers might be doing. Whereas I think for whatever reason, Microsoft, apart from a very small section on the Cappy game, like is it Deeper Down? I'm not sure, which had a very, very short trailer. There didn't seem to be any focus on the indie scene at all. It seemed to be very much like, do you like guys? Do you like guns?
Yeah.
Do you like guys shooting guns?
Do you like television?
Do you like? You bloody love TV. And I just thought, like, I can't get involved in which is better. I just know that I think Microsoft had an absolute reason to be proud of some of the smaller studios they've championed. Whatever's happened afterwards, between like some people saying they were difficult to work with or not. The fact was, difficult to work with or not, Fez shifted a fuck ton of units.
Yeah.
So did eventually Super Meat Boy, once it was done. Limbo, and people recognised them. People got that attention because it was on the XBLA platform. And it's, I know this seems like a really unfashionable idea. I'm not about to start defending the RM in any way, just so you know. I'm not going that far. But I think that really just Microsoft had a right to be a bit prouder and maybe just kind of like keep those studios on board, and be like, actually, you guys have done some incredible stuff, and maybe this is where gaming is going. There's only so much shooty gunman that people are going to kind of surely going to have their fill of shooty gunman at some point. I think the only difference is Sony were much prouder, and they actually put those guys on stage. Like these are the guys we're working with, so fine.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, well, you could even go further back to Geometry Wars.
Yes, you can absolutely.
Like we have been doing sort of a side podcast series on this called Death of a Generation, where we talk about the most important games of this generation. And one of the first games I said is that you've got to have Geometry Wars on there because
Yes.
they took this tiny little file and then threw it onto the Xbox Live and said, okay, well, yeah, that's on there with like Joust and whatever else and all these old games from the 80s, and it worked, and for a tiny fee, and it's a great game. It's still an amazing game to play now.
Yeah.
And from that, it opened the floodgates for all of these games that did appear, as you said, all the games that you've mentioned on the Xbox Live.
Yeah.
And I think that is the one thing, is it is surprising that Microsoft didn't come out at E3, and I didn't expect so much from the original conference in May. But at least from E3, I thought they'd give some sort of time to say, here, look, this is what we have done, and this is what we want to show going forward. And to even not get anything like that was just, I was stunned by it.
Yeah, I think it was, because it's less about, I'm not going to sit here and say they should have done this, they should have done that, but it is absolutely, the way I've put it before. I think there's a reason to be proud there, and just to remind people that it's very easy to say, like, Microsoft are the bad guys, because it's really easy to paint big bad guys.
Would certainly not say that.
I think, no, I'm sorry, I'm not saying it did.
No.
It's just more like, guys, you actually champion some really great stuff, some really great stuff. And I certainly, like, at least even a few years ago, looked at the XBLA platform as that is the right fit for Mediatonic. We're never going to make a AAA game. Probably, I don't even know what AA game is, but like, down from that, that's never going to happen, because not only are we not big enough, but we wouldn't want to, we concentrate on our ideas that are just big enough for the game that contains them. We don't need to have a ridiculous budget to do that.
Yeah, I think I look at my ratio of games that I've bought on XBLA compared to the PlayStation Network, and it's about 90 to 10, and I think that 10 pretty much consists of Thomas Was Alone, and everything else is XBLA. Yeah. And it's surprising, but like there's been the rumbling over the last couple of days after Microsoft made their 180 last week on DRM. Sure. And now there's this talk about them, potentially giving indie developers, self-publishing rights for the Xbox One. So it seems to be really up in the air exactly how it's going to go. And people have been saying, for and against on the whole DRM thing, but I think there's no reason why developers shouldn't be given the same freedom, the same rights as it clearly seems they're going to be given for the PS Vita and the PS4, as they should have for the Xbox One.
I think what's interesting about the allowing indie developers to publish, which is obviously great, But it's how we managed to not have a situation that echoes what's happening on the App Store. You know, where we have 9 million apps, most of which make fart noises.
Yeah, I think the Ouya is going to have that problem pretty quickly by the sounds of it.
Yeah, and I think like it's interesting because he becomes the arbiter. You know, he's the person who makes the decision. Actually, yes, this, not this, because the moment you kind of you have someone there saying this is the right quality of game, that's not too far away from needing a publisher to give you support. You know.
Yeah, that's true.
And just to be fair, I've not thought this through anyway. Just in case, I'm sure someone could listen to this and go, "No, Jeff, that's entirely wrong."
If it sounds terrible, I'll just cut it out.
Thanks, brilliant. You're all right, Mark. You can stay. So yeah, I just think there has to be a middle ground because I don't want to cycle through. I don't want to basically only be able to see the top sellers and for the top sellers to be there because they ripped off something but got a bit more attention than the guys who made it first. You know, we don't want
a
Vlambeer situation. Exactly. Yeah. You know, we want. I think that goes for both Sony and Microsoft on the previous system. Is they by and large, because there was, you needed a publisher to kind of create that middleman. Quality was fairly high. Not always. I played some awful stuff on I've played some awful stuff on both of them actually. But I think certainly like the published stuff by Microsoft and Sony, the quality, the high bar for quality was set.
Yep.
You know, so even if the game wasn't quite your thing, you knew it wasn't going to fall apart on you, and it was going to generally do what you wanted it to do, and hopefully be quite exciting at the same time.
Well, it's certainly exciting if nothing else going forward, and if nothing else, there is this spotlight on indie development at the moment, and that spotlight has only been getting bigger over the last couple of years.
It's great.
And I think it's only gonna get bigger going forward, which is and seeing that we've got consoles now that seem to be just dedicated to this system. Like, I don't know if you got to play any of the game stick at all.
No, the guys on Xbox, it looked amazing.
Yeah,
and like Slingshot Racing. I know I can't remember the company who made that look great, but yeah, the game stick looked fantastic.
And it's great to see these devices that are less than £100, and it's like you can just plug it in with a HDMI port and boom, off you go.
Yeah,
and that's just fascinating to see. And like, because I looked at it and I was immediately reminded of those kind of crappy controllers that were also the actual console as well. You could get from like a flea market for like £5.
Like the Mad Catz controllers that always broke really soon after you got them. Brilliant. Yeah,
and I brought that up to him and the guy there, and he gave me a quick look and had a small laugh to himself of, "Don't you dare fucking compare us to that again." And we moved swiftly on.
That was done. We're done with that.
Yeah, but that was amazing to see, and it's exciting to see that not only are Sony and potentially Microsoft giving that platform for indie developers, but if you've got like whole consoles dedicated to it, it's just exciting to see what's going to happen going forward, and where we're going to be in 12 months' time at potentially the next ETOO and what happens there.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think the indie scene is just absolutely thriving at the moment, and it has some really interesting voices within it as well. There's a lot of opinions flying around, and a lot of people kind of like working out. Feels like people are kind of, a lot of the people in the indie community are almost ignoring like entirely what's happening on like AAA or major, and kind of like building their own rules and their own understanding of what is acceptable in that community. Not just with the games, but in the way that people kind of carry themselves, and interact with each other and create those spaces where, exactly like ETOO, people should feel they'll be able to come along and meet people and share ideas and just create better art, I guess, which is kind of, I think, wonderful for the industry in the long run. Yeah. It'd be really interesting to see what happens, like kind of like you're saying, in 10 years' time, these people that are making these games on their own in the bedroom at the moment, with minimal budget and all the time in the world, just kind of like fill out those ideas. It'd be really interesting to see like what those people are doing in 10 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, I've made the analogy on the show probably a few times and should try and come up with a new one, but it's just the idea of you've got that small little band like Oceansize or Ruben, which is always my little band.
Ah, fucking Ruben, yes!
I put that in there just to see what the response I would get was.
Excellent.
But it's like, you know, as soon as you're hooked on them and you just can't
Yeah.
wait to see the next thing. Like the moment that I played Super Meat Boy, I was like, right, anything that
Yes.
they put out. And then like the Binding of Isaac came out, and I was like, right, yeah, this is the greatest thing ever. So like, I'm, you know, really excited to see Mugenics and excited to see what
Yeah.
Team Meat do next. And it's the same thing, like your little band make that album, and it's like you just constantly looking on forums and all this sort of stuff. And it's, you know, it's a position that kind of existed, I would say, to a certain degree, but there was always this wall between the developer and the consumer, and
You'd find that sometimes someone who you really respected, you wouldn't know they were working on a game until the game had been out for like 6 months. It's like, oh, they're working on that. Maybe I'll pick it up. Whereas like now, it just feels like you're really hyper aware of like that. It's exactly like you say with the bands. And Team Meat as well. I agree. I would never really be into a game that, shorn of all of its artwork, that is designed like Mugenics. That wouldn't appeal to me. You know?
I probably agree with you on that one actually as well.
Not going to stop me buying it because it's just like the difficult B-side album or acoustic album. You know, it's just like, sure, well,
It's their Kid A.
yeah, you know what I mean. It's like maybe I won't like it, but I bet I'll like some of it enough. You know, I bet like I'll still get an insight into what these guys are doing, and I bet it will still make me laugh.
Yeah.
There'll be a couple of good tracks in there. You know what I mean? It's like, and that is how I'm starting to feel about some of the developers that we're hearing about at the moment. It's like, well, if those guys have made it, why wouldn't I just give it a go? I like who like Terry Kavanagh is another perfect example.
Oh, definitely.
I'll play anything that Terry Kavanagh does because I know that he'd have given some thought to design, and that thought would have been, is it going to make them laugh, or is it just genuinely a really smart piece of design which is going to like send a dopamine hit to my head and make me feel really smart for like a short amount of time.
All I want to experience in this lifetime at some point is playing Super Hexagon on the Oculus Rift.
Yeah, but you realise once that happens, nothing will ever be the same again.
Doesn't matter. I want to get to that point.
Then do it.
It's like, you know, do you get to that point or do you not do it and regret never getting to that point?
I think you're right. I think you'd regret never getting to that point.
Exactly.
Fair enough. You'd be seeing in 5 dimensions for the rest of your life, but it's okay. You know,
that just sounds like the worst acid trip ever. Well, on that note, I think we'll come to a close. I have enjoyed this immensely, and I'm going to be harassing you on Twitter about Oceansize. So look forward to that.
Please do. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks
Yeah.
for asking about Foul Play.
I mean, just quickly, you know, again, plug Foul Play, plug anything, your Twitter, anything you want to do.
Cool. Yeah. So, Foul Play, like I say, it's out on Steam and XBLA towards the end of August, early September. I've had an incredible team working on it. It is a game made purely out of love, and I cannot wait for people to play it. I am Jeff_Tanton on Twitter, which is super exciting. Please follow me, certainly over the next few months, because we're going to be tweeting loads and doing loads of cool stuff for Foul Play. And yes, hopefully, if you see me at an event, come up and say hello, because I'm not scary, and likely I'll want to chat to you about Oceansize or video games.
And I can confirm he's not scary, because it takes a lot for me to go and talk to someone, and you know, here we are now. Right, yeah, once again, Jeff, thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, no worries, Mark, it's great.
Yeah, and if you want to come on at any point, if you want to plug Foul Play, if you want to talk about any games you've been playing, come on, talk about The Last of Us, you know, you're more than welcome to.
Absolutely, I will do. Take care, yourself, and good luck with the podcast, mate.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone that's been listening, and we'll see you again next time.
Cool. Bye-bye.